Welcome back to Primary Source of China Investment. Peng.guo and I are here with show E5, and we're saying the quiet part out loud this week. U.S. and China have filed divorce papers. We're going to get into the reasons why, but many years ago, I wrote an article that doing business in China was like a marriage. And like a lot of marriages, it looks like this one is ending in divorce. That's not always a bad thing, but it does upend the status quo. So why am I calling this a divorce? First, China is a trade-led economy, and trade is declining, or at least increasing at a decreasing rate, and Beijing is looking for other markets. While China's total exports were up 4% year to date, trade with the US is down 12%, and trade with the European Union is flat. So what is China doing? They're looking for other markets. Trade with Africa is up 24%, and trade with Russia, although from a low base, is up 92%. Second, foreign direct investment has plummeted. In the first quarter of this year, 20 billion. That's compared with 100 billion first quarter last year. Massive drop off. Third, China's new anti-espionage law is vague enough to make compliance much more difficult for foreign firms on the ground, effectively putting them at the mercy of the regulators. And fourth, the US is complicit also because they've implemented tariffs, anti-chip legislation, and bolstered trade and security agreements with like-minded Asian capitals. But the October 7th CHIPS Act is the most significant shift in attitude. For decades, presidents from both parties vowed that economic engagement would benefit both China and the US. As China has become richer, the politicians claim its development will provide jobs for American workers, and China itself will become a freer country and more friendly to the West. That was the operating thesis. Only some of those promises have come true. So for those four reasons, I'm saying China and the US, and also China and the European Union, are having a divorce. Now, what is that going to mean going forward? We'll discuss that. But also, Peng.guo, I'd like to get your thoughts. Do you think I'm being overly dramatic here?
I heard it like the marriage, divorce, that is like the word I heard it before. But any marriage or it's really like the lifetime partner. So it's still kind of the partnership. But for partnership, sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. It's pretty normal. But I think anything you mentioned, the trade is really like the fail action. So you bring whatever you think is good, and the other people bring whatever they can provide it, that exchange. So really nobody forces you to doing anything. But China government cannot make any policy to force US investors to go to the China. So really like the attraction or attractive or not attractive. So, and also we are really in the globalization, the money or the capital resources that float in the globally. So that's really like the based on the deal, based on the fair trade. So people are willing to do it. That's the motivation just to make the profit. In right. China, like the export, you usually take like the contribution to 20 or 30% of the economy. But right now, China have like the make the consumption, make the first priority, investment secondary, the trade, the net trade probably take expect like 4% or 5% of the economy right now. So it's really significantly reduced. Yeah, it seems to match what the number you provided.
Yeah, we've talked about trade in the past. You know, there's this shifting of trade right now. So Chinese entities opening up factories in Mexico and US companies looking for alternatives to China manufacturing. So all of that is going to happen. But my thesis is more based on the geopolitical position of these, you know, the EU, the US, and China. And I'm looking at actions. China is definitely, Wang Yi today is demanding EU to, you know, clarify its position on the working relationship between the EU and China. You know, these are the kind of things that parties
that's mostly, in my opinion, that's extremely unreliable, extremely changed whoever makes the decisions, they don't take any responsibility. And also after they retire, they just change a job, or they just the next people just clean up the mess. It's really nothing to do with you. For me, it's always see the history. So because those kind of things is already happened so many times in the history.
Yeah, I think it's important to look. One is the macro level, the other is the micro level. And at the micro level, there was a great article in the Wall Street Journal from Wei Lingling. She wrote about what companies on the ground are doing in order to separate their overseas and their Chinese operations. So the example they gave is this company called Pixelworks. They make chips used in videos and electronic display devices. And their China operation is trying to get listed on the STAR board, which is the Science and Technology Board in Shanghai. In order to do that, they effectively have to split their two companies. And what does that mean practically? Well, their China business has to turn over all of their data, all of their IP, all of their corporate work on the mainland to Chinese regulators. And they have to ensure that none of that business and the US business is commingled. So if there's anybody in China doing work for their US entity, they have to be separated off and in fact have separate offices. So this is what it's going to look like going forward if you want to have operations in China. It will have to be a fully functioning Chinese organization.
That's right. So I think I heard many news about that. The same thing for the companies from China. If they want to run business in the United States, they have to totally separate from the operations from the China. It definitely understand an easy way to do it. Otherwise, if both government change the policy, change the rules, it will significantly impact the entire global operations. I think it's a good way to reduce the political risk.
Yeah, the problem is a lot of companies have to unwind a lot of for new companies going forward, that's sort of the blueprint. But for companies that are running businesses on the ground, they have to completely reconfigure their operations. They have to reconfigure how they communicate between their offices outside of China and their offices inside of China. I'll end with one point today. Howard Schultz, the on again and off again CEO of Starbucks, told Tsinghua University in 2017, "We are operating Starbucks here as a Chinese company." The implication is that Starbucks is operating like any other Chinese firm, giving access to their data and their IP to the party members on its staff. It's a new dawn, and companies have to comply with this or don't do business there.
That's really like the challenge. So is make the business environment more complicated because of the policy and the rule if keeping it changing, and also if anything unclear or something. The consequence would be pretty clear. So the people maybe just move out or just reduce the size or maybe lose the motivation to do business. So that really means sooner or later, the society will see the consequence.
Well, we're going to leave it with that final point, peng.guo. I think it's very, very telling and very accurate. So look forward to catching up next week, and we'll see you then.
Thank you.